Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast, episode number 221 of the show. This week, we have 4 new LitRPG reviews for you. I'm Ramon Mejia, and I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and author interviews. There you go. Man, this quarantine is really getting to me. Got 4 new LitRPG reviews for you this week on the show. That's going to include the Traveling the Dungeon Travels book number 2, Mageblood, a fantasy LitRPG, Mephisto's Magic Online book number 1, also Grim Beginnings, the Ashen Plain book number 1, and A Snake's Life. 4 distinct LitRPG titles for you this week. Before we get into any of that, of course, we're going to go into LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, not a long section this week. We have a couple sales deals for you folks. That's kind of it. We have sales this week for The Ritualist, the first book in the Completionist Chronicles series, which is absolutely a great series to get into. The newest book is going to be coming out later in May, I believe, middle of May. We also have the Good Guy Chronicles book numbers 4 through 6 for free again. This is an omnibus collection of that particular back half of that series. Book number 8, I think, just came out recently. So there's a whole lot of book, series to read there. Also, Healer's Gift, book number 1 is for free. Alter World Play to Live is free, perma-free, I think it is. As is Patch 17, which is another good long LitRPG series translation, and Continue Online Part 1 Memories is also free. A lot of those last few are just all perma-free. Looked them up for you just to make sure these are all good, highly recommended series that you can get into without any cost to you. They're all on Kindle Unlimited, of course, so you can also check them out that way. Give the authors a little bit of that KU money for your paid reads. But of course, also have a link in the show notes for a nice, easy to click on link to kind of organize your Amazon search for LitRPG by title, and also by price. So it goes from $0 on. So there's some nice titles on it, but of course it's very, very about what is actually going to be LitRPG there. So take that in consideration. So that's LitRPG news. On to stuff that is out now. Stuff that has come out recently. Haven't had a chance to read it, but it's out there for you to read. And that includes Dungeon World book number 5. I think this is the last book in this particular series. I could be mistaken. But it's highly popular, very fun, enjoyable. A lot of good fans on there. We also have the second book in the Sun and Shadow online series is out for you to enjoy, as is Street Cultivation 2 from Sarah Lynn. I enjoyed book number 1 in the series. Definitely more on the cultivation side, just has notifications and such. Also out though is the third book in the Dungeon Wars series, sort of. This isn't really as much a story as it is a collection of notes and information about the world in which this series and the Slime Dungeon Chronicles kind of exists in. If you're into like a lot of like backstory lore, if you loved reading DM manuals, this is probably something that you're going to enjoy if you like this series as well. So definitely go check it out. Also out now is Second Skin book number 6. As is a new series called Bright Blade, a LitRPG adventure Underverse book number 1. And a novella called Carrion Crow is out as well. The 5th book in the Idle System series. This just keep going on and on. It's a cultivation kind of game story that I've enjoyed. It is out for you to enjoy as well. And the Everlands book number 3, Absalon's Heretic, which I believe is, according to the novel, has been the last book in this series as well. So all kinds of stuff for you to enjoy as ebooks, but there are a few more LitRPG audiobooks out for you to enjoy, including the 3rd book in the monster battling series called Jin Tamer, as is the 2nd book in the World Tree Online series by E.A. Hooper, which is different than the other World Tree series. This one's called Demon Lord, out as an audiobook for you to enjoy. Also out is the 4th book in the Afterlife Online series as an audiobook, Deadline. Also, Thousand Tales book number 5, Learning to Fly. So all kinds of good stuff for you to enjoy as audiobooks. In upcoming LitRPG, this is just where I read up a bunch of titles that are coming out in the near future, so you can plan your purchasing schedule or your publication schedule as it goes. On April the 14th, it'll be Watcher's Test, a LitRPG saga. On April the 20th, the third book in the After Apocalypse series, Dungeons of Perdition. A new series from Mountain Dew Press will be out on April 24th called Winter Harvest. The sixth book in the Realm Between series will be out on April the 24th. The fourth book in the Rogue Dungeon series will be out on April the 28th. April 29th will give you Discardium book number 4. April 29th will be the third book in the Players Reaches the Top series. April the 30th will be Legends Online book number 5. May the 1st, it was May the 1st, not the 15th. It'll be Completions Chronicles book number 5, Ruthless. We just talked about book number 1 being free for you to enjoy, and I highly recommend that you do so. Enjoy it. It's a good series. On May the 5th, it'll be The Blood Crown book number 2. On May the 8th, it'll be Alchemy Online book number 4. That's actually shifted from the 1st to the 8th. May the 12th will be Shattered Sword Eternal Online book number 1. This is actually a weird release schedule for this series. The ebook is really scheduled to be released on May the 12th. The audiobook is out now. That's right. The audiobook came up for the ebook by almost a good month. So there you go. On May 17th, Gloominess Plus 4 will be out. May the 17th, a new series called Biomedical Self-Engineering book number 1 will be out. May 20th is the Challenger's Call book number 5. A lot of people will enjoy this series. Glory of the Formation Emperor book number 4 will be out on May the 31st. Sometime in May, the author of Legendary Dungeon Seed says his story will be out. June the 4th, it'll be the 9th book in the Good Guy series. June the 9th, it'll be the 6th book in the Reality Bender series, a series I've really enjoyed. July the 1st, it'll be the 9th book in the System Apocalypse series. On July the 8th, it'll be the 2nd book in the Project Stellar series, which is a Russian translation novel. July 31st, it'll be a new series called Arrows of Justice. On August the 8th, it'll be Eric Uglin's 4th book in the Bad Guy series called War of the Posers. And August the 18th, Intellectium, a real RPG series, which is another Russian translation story. So there you go. All the stuff that I know is coming out in the near future. On to new releases and reviews. And first up this week is going to be Traveling the Dungeon, Dungeon Travels book number 2, written by Austin Sleet. It is 259 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Dale wanted to do more than survive as a dungeon core. His experience with the gods made it clear that with power, he could do as he pleased, and without it, he was simply a toy of the powerful. Unfortunately, it isn't just the gods who have plans for the traveling dungeon. Follow Dale as he tries to create his own little world, study magic and chant devices, and create challenges for the gods and an archmage, all while trying to keep Miss Bluebox happy. From the Spire of the West to the Orcs of the South to a discovery that will rock the world, Dale can't help but shove his stone where it doesn't belong. Okay, this is a good dungeon core novel. This dungeon does, the author should say, does something a little bit different with his dungeon core novel than others have done. That kind of gives a very open, almost limitless possibility of storytelling. What this dungeon setup is that this dungeon travels all over the globe, setting up entrances. So it's not really tied to a specific region or location in this world. And what this kind of ends up allowing is for like these really interesting peeks into like just a variety of magical cultures and magical RPG races, and just seeing like their little like cultural. It's almost like you're an anthropologist picking out these little fantasy RPG cultures and communities. And that's one of the things I think I really enjoyed about the story, is just like the huge variety of possibilities, and even within the story itself, like the different kind of cultures that are kind of brought together. At its core, it's still a dungeon core novel, so there's adventures and there's traps and there's mazes for people to go through and challenges to go through. But it's not as much about the dungeon progression by murder hoboing everybody as much as possible. This very much kind of sets itself up as almost a challenge dungeon for the various races. And a lot of the story, especially in the second book, is almost as much about the dungeon, who's sentient, learning about the various cultures and kind of deciding what class path it wants to go down. In this particular case, it's magical in this instance, and so you're getting a lot of very good, very interesting, very deep magical theorizing and magical progression and discovery on the RPG side of things. The first book was honestly a little bit light. You got some notifications for class stuff. This one's probably a little bit heavier than that, just because the class stuff is so intricate to this RPG world. Kind of in the same way that it is for the Wandering Inn, and that classes kind of define the role and power sets for everybody, and in this case includes a dungeon. And so there is some progression in that respect in it, but that particular aspect isn't like the huge emphasis. Like it's a good portion of it, but it's not the thing. A lot of the story again revolves around magic theorizing, exploration, some of the challenge stuff, and also just like world building as the dungeon kind of pokes its head into different areas of the world, deciding where he wants to place his next dungeon opening, so that he gets new creatures to come in. So it's kind of fun. It's interesting. I've always liked it. And this one is no different. So I enjoyed book 1, enjoyed book number 2 just as much. Gets a score of 7.6 out of 10. That's the Traveling Dungeon, The Dungeon Travels, book number 2, with a score of 7.6 out of 10. And next we have Mageblood, a fantasy LitRPG series, Mephisto's Magic Online, an MMO, obviously. See the abbreviation there. Written by Christopher Johns. It is 269 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. A dazzling world of wonder and power, gifts from the game gods for every person, the perfect magic for every user. Seth, a popular streamer, can't wait to see what this new world has in store. It's sure to be the blast for a guy who always plays a caster, and his friends are going to be right in the thick of it with him. The game boasts algorithms designed to read biometrics and brain patterns to find the perfect magical fit for the user. Magic so personalized that no two casters will ever be the same. In fact, the game company is so sure they will always be right that you can't remake your character. Now nothing is as it should have been. Word happenings abound, and the group of streamers must fight to evolve their gifts before their live stream of the game world. Loading, welcome to Mephisto's Magic Online. So there you go. This was a harder story to get into initially. I found myself honestly uninterested in the novel until it's only got to about the 8% mark in the story. The stuff before that it's not bad or anything. It's just like, it's a lot of character development stuff. It's a lot of real life stuff that sets up the main characters, who he is, his group of friends, and his relationship with a particular female who's just to me screamed, oh, that's romantic interest. And I'm like, okay, that's not really anything. But a lot of it's just like, oh, okay, that's not stuff that was particularly interesting to me. But once the story gets past the 80% mark and the main character gets into his new virtual reality pod and goes into this new game world and the character creation stuff happens, then it goes pretty well. Once in the game, again, things are good. The character explores the game world, fights monsters, quests, level up, develops skill trees, all the stuff you expect. And there are hints at a real world impact from the game, but it's not something that's really developed in this particular first novel very much. And other than that romantic story thread, which really wasn't something I enjoyed in particular, everything is pretty slice of life. Again, it's a story where you're following the main character. There are no like world-ending threats, or no one's trapped in the game. There's no crazy AI trying to control everybody. Instead, again, the story is just about the main character and his friends playing the game, adventuring, meeting NPCs, crafting, and growing as the game kind of forces them into classes and roles that they wouldn't necessarily have chosen for themselves. And I think that last bit is probably the thing that's trying to separate the story from other LitRPG stories. Overall, though, it's a good slice of life series. And again, that one little aspect of the romance thing just didn't work for me personally. Other people will definitely enjoy it. It's just it's not my thing, especially the way that this one was kind of set up. But for me, I still had a good time with it. Good to score 7.3 out of 10. That's Mageblood, a fantasy LitRPG series. Mephisto's Magic Online, book number 1, with a score of 7.3 out of 10. And next up, we have Grim Beginnings, the Ashen Plane, book number 1, a LitRPG series written by Maxwell Farmer. It is 311 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. 25-year-old janitor turned professional gamer John is so good at the latest virtual reality fantasy game that he attracts the attention of an imprisoned undead magical beast while competing in the Kingdoms and Valor World Championship. Murdered in his gaming chair and summoned to another world full of magic and wonder, John is given a choice: inherit the beast's power and work to free it, or die. Accepting the undead creature's power and a second chance at life, John is given a new name, Grim. As a new man with the ability to use death magic, Grim sets off on the Ashen plane to fulfill his quest. Join him as he befriends a mutated orc, fights an army of gnolls, and works to free his patron in this first book in the LitRPG series, The Ashen Plane. So there we go. This is kind of a theme for the week. It seems like a lot of hard beginnings to get into, and this one is unfortunately one of the harder ones. The beginning section of this was probably, I had to push through it a little bit, to be honest. It's not because it's poorly written. It's just because the setup of the story feels kind of forced and slow. The first bit, the first bit of the story doesn't actually feel like literary. It feels like a fantasy story because it's this setup for the story world where there's a battle between the gods, and the main god in our story loses, but he sees a chance for a long-term play. And honestly, just because it didn't feel like LitRPG, it just wasn't interesting to me as somebody. That's what I came for. And I honestly, at this point, I read the first little section, like, oh, this isn't really super interesting to me. And I put it down for a couple weeks. I put the book down and I came back to it later. And only after I kind of just pushed past that part, I was like, okay, I'll give this another shot and we'll see how this goes. And the story gets a little bit better when the main character setting is his character in the game. It's a little bit dry still because it's a lot of crunchy stuff like character races, abilities, classes, all that good stuff, which if you're into that, great. But they came off a little bit dry compared to, the rest of the story. But once the main character gets into the game world, the storytelling improves because, again, the main character has someone to talk to. You get a little bit more world development. But even within that first section in the game world, the storyline felt a little forced. And this is mostly by comparison because you can tell that there was always kind of the plan to have the main character have a companion, get this orc companion that he's given, which is described in the novel description, so it's not a spoiler. His ready acceptance of this user of dark magic and soul magic kind of conflicts a little bit with the eventually revealed orc taboos against that kind of stuff. So I was like, oh, it felt a little bit forced to me, in other words. And a lot of the beginning portion of this novel, up until like maybe 34% of the story, felt a little bit forced. And that's just because there's a lot of stuff that's being set up here that you can tell is being set up, and it's being pushed in a certain direction of like, oh, he gets a companion, he's getting these quest lines for a series quest line, and also for like just this story quest line. And it's more along as that it doesn't feel like it flows naturally up until, again, about the 30 or 40% mark. And after that point, things really do get better and it gets a lot more entertaining because at that point, the pacing and the flow of the story just feels like it makes more of a natural sense. Like I feel like it's just having a good time. And that's kind of the thing I really enjoyed about the story the most, is that when it wasn't trying to force the particular plotline, it was entertaining because the author got a chance to tell a little more background story history about this orc race that the main character is involved in. That's where he finds himself. And also like more world building there, and also just like this natural history and flow of adventure and action and friendship and all that good stuff in the storyline, of course, the quest and everything. And that was probably the part I liked the most. Unfortunately, that's a smaller section of the novel. A lot of the story just kind of felt like stuff I've already read before, like just like general adventuring, questing. Not all of it having to do with the plot, of course, but also some of it's just like, oh, I've read stories with this particular dungeon or adventure and whatever the case is. The things that are a little bit different about the story that aren't in others is the main character's class and the secondary character's class. Again, the main character again kind of has this magic heavy armor user kind of combination, which in my brain automatically feels conflicting, but the author pushes it out there and it kind of works for the story. But on the whole, the story is kind of just like, okay, it's not bad. It's not super amazing, but it's kind of okayish. Again, there are a couple places where it's like, oh, that was a good section, or that was a good adventure, or that was some good world building there. But I think for me, I had a harder time just kind of recovering from that beginning section of it. And it's kind of hard to come back from that, for me at least. So while overall, I think I had a good time, it wasn't super amazing, but it wasn't bad either. It's just like, oh, okay, this is a good, solid storytelling, good writing. There are some good pieces, but a lot of the adventuring and monster killing and quests felt a little standard. So for me, it's a score of 7.2 out of 10. That's, again, not a bad score. I had a good time with it overall. It just wasn't really good. It's just okay. So that's Grim Beginnings, the Ashen Plane book number 1 with the score of 7.2 out of 10. Okay, next up is going to be A Snake's Life, written by Kenneth Arendt. This one is published by Shadow Alley Press, the folks who will give you Viridian Gates online. It is 300-ish pages. Actually, the novel, Amazon isn't say currently as of this recording, so I'm guessing at about 300 pages. It is $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. The afterlife isn't always what you think. A loving father of 3 children, Albert lived a life of few regrets. He served his country far from home. He outlived his soulmate. He died alone. However, the assumptions about a peaceful eternity reunited with his wife are thrown out the window when a meddling god digs his fingers into Albert's afterlife. The positive: he will have a chance to see his wife again. The negative: he has to survive the dangers of the legendary world tree for the next 300 years. He's been reincarnated into a world full of magical evolutions, monstrous deer, sassy 10-year-old elves, and untold hidden dangers. It won't be easy, but if life has taught Albert anything, it's this. If something is worth having, it's worth fighting for, and he intends to fight for. Okay. Like a lot of the stories this week, this had a harder beginning to get through. The first 14% of the story is a typical re-monster story, with the main character being reincarnated as a snake. He eats, he kills, he evolves, and it's kind of this repeating cycle. And there's not really much else to that beginning section. And frankly, I found it to be a little tedious, but that's mostly because I've read this kind of story before. If you've never read this kind of story before, it'll feel fresh and new and great. But for me, I've read plenty of these monster stories before online and in other books. And that beginning section was just, I read it before. And it's not badly written or anything. It's just, eat, kill, evolve. It's a cycle. But after the 14% mark, the story becomes much more interesting. The main character finally meets somebody who he can talk to besides himself. And from then on, you get a much broader story, because the entire universe in the story world opens up at that point. You learn, and this isn't spoiler, it's a novel description, that there are multiple worlds connected by this world tree. And so you kind of have this much broader world where the main character actually in this novel goes and explores. He interacts with people. And of course he kills the heck out of a variety of monsters to evolve to his next form. And it's just kind of fun, especially the variety of worlds he can go to and the world building that's done there as he explores and interacts with these local cultures or these, mini adventures. But it's very much a slice of life story where he's just kind of going through these different worlds, killing and evolving. And the RPG side of things is a little more minimalistic, and it's mostly is just notifications for the evolution for the main character, but there is still RPG progression because there are some very specific requirements, like the main character having to kill 1,000 water elemental creatures to get the specific evolution or this ability, or killing, living for 100 years, or, eating 1,000 pounds of dirt, whatever the case is. And so that's kind of where the RPG aspects come into it. However, another interesting aspect for the story, for me at least, was the main character. He's kind of a murder hobo. He's he's not a full murder hobo in that he kills indiscriminately, but he's definitely like 70% murder hobo, and that he does a lot of killing to advance his goals. He doesn't have any problem killing sentient species because, again, he's a monster now. And while he doesn't kill completely indiscriminately, he's more than happy to murder somebody for hurting somebody he cares about, or for himself, or monsters, or entire groups of people. And it's all a very faithful representation of what it would be like to become a monster, with only the memory of your former humanity kind of guiding what you're doing. So it's a very kind of different kind of story. So if you're interested in that, I definitely recommend it. If overall, it's a good story. Again, once you kind of get past that 40% mark, you find something interesting and fresh because of the different worlds you can go to. For me, it's the highest score of the episode this week. It gets a score of 7.7 out of 10. That's A Snake's Life with a score of 7.7 out of 10. Okay, that's it for the show, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and thanks for putting up with my my quarantine mustache that's happening here. I've decided to kind of let it grow out a little bit, see if I can finally grow that beard that I've always dreamt about. I've been praying to the beard gods, using special oils. And this is what I have so far after a few weeks of not shaving. So there we go. But everyone, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Remember, you can catch us and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, and our website at litrpgpodcast.com. If you want to get the latest LitRPG reviews and releases from us, remember, we put together a whole list of all the releases we found on Amazon for audiobooks and ebooks every single week. We actually also produced a newsletter that we send out to you in case you just don't want the list for itself. Just go on our website. You can find the links to that newsletter and everything. But thanks for hanging out again. And remember, folks, until we can hang it again, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.